last night we had direct pointing, and Joe missed it. I bet he feels bad.
No, I spaced out.
But we talked about Upadana.
Talked about, sorry?
Upadana.
I don't know what that is.
Okay.
Hello.
Hello. Upadana means, it's translated, it's a Sanskrit and Pali word, both, spelled the same.
How do you spell it?
Upadana.
Wow.
Upadana. Yeah.
Upadana.
Thank you. And it means fuel, but it's been translated as actually attachment. But the literal name is that it's a fuel, and it's a fuel. It points to the idea that attachment is the fuel for desire. So it's very interesting. And so they call it Upadana. How you doing? You can feel free to sit in a chair or a cushion, wherever you want to, wherever you're most comfortable. So Upadana, we talked about it last night but in Buddhism, not only in Buddhism but a lot of traditions, it's been attachment is a primary thing, and whether we look at it as a spiritual, part of our spiritual practice, or just a way of being, attachment can lead to our suffering, unless we got it figured out, per se. But attachment gets kind of a bad rap in Buddha, and in the Buddhist tradition, whether we look at it as a psychology or a religion or whatever, because people come to Buddhism and they think that it's such a well, and it is. It's really a joyful type of tradition. It's based on finding peace of mind through practices of meditation and the practice of insight and morality and knowledge, and learning about the Buddhist teachings and that kind of thing. But then this idea of attachment comes along, and people say, well, these things, they bring joy to my life, and all of a sudden they're labeled attachments, like I shouldn't have any of these things. They shouldn't be a part of things, and I shouldn't have goals, and I shouldn't be going, I shouldn't be looking for finer things in life and that kind of thing. But that's not what it means at all. It means the attachment, if something that we want is taken away from us and it causes suffering for us, that's obviously the kind of attachment that the Buddha was talking about. So we could talk about anything from obviously an addiction of some sort. We actually, last night we ran through our different attachments, and things like food and cigarettes, and alcohol didn't come up, but typically it would. Alcohol and drugs, these are addictive, things. So of course we could look at those as attachments. But some of the finer things, if we can be attached to an idea, we can be attached to a belief. It's very easy for us to do that. We are so conditioned that we can be brought up with an idea, and if somebody says that they don't believe in that, we will fight for it. And maybe not us, but some people will fight for their belief and their ideas. So it's really that sticky stuff, the stuff that we have trouble letting go of. The sticky stuff that, just like, an attachment is something sticky. But ultimately, the Buddha said the biggest attachment we have, well, let me back up here a little bit. The Four Noble Truths, most of us know about the Four Noble Truths. It was Buddha's first teaching, his first insight, I guess we could say. He said that we suffer, and we suffer because of our desires, and this is where we get into the attachment thing right away. The desire, he went further to say that the desire for more of something or for less of something. So the more of something, of course, is the greed, and the less of something is the aversion, you know. So, and both of these are attachments. You know, we can have attachments to have things a certain way, you know, less of this or more of this. This is the preferences that we've mentioned in here before, having preferences for things to be a certain way. And you've probably heard me say, or some of you that know me have heard me say that the desire is the desire for things to be other than what they are. When we aren't resting in the present moment, generally we're thinking of the past or the future, and we want things, you know, we're kind of wrestling with this or wrestling with that, and kind of creating a certain type of future that we would like to have. And that's fine, we should be doing that, but if we get attached to an outcome for the future, that's an attachment. If something happened in the past, or we gathered something in the past, and we somehow lost it. Let's say we had a nice bank account, and then somebody found a way to take $10,000 out of it, you know, and there's no way that we can regain that. So and if we got hurt by that, most of us would. That's some form of attachment right there, and you know. So I'm saying this just so that we get an understanding of what attachment is and how to look at it. So the idea that, going back to the Four Noble Truths, the Buddha said that we suffer because our desires directly linked to these attachments that we have. But he said, but there is a way to get out of this, samsaric wheel of, you know, of suffering. And he said it is through, basically through the understanding of this doctrine, or this teaching of our attachments. And he said we have to put a little effort into it. We have to be a little diligent, and we're doing it. We're here. You know, the rest of Phoenix is not here, but we are. You know, and so we're doing some of the work right now, including, you know, meditating and that type of thing, because meditation will show us where our attachments are, because wherever the mind goes generally is going towards some kind of attachment, or we can feel that attachment eventually. And he said, so that's the third noble truth. The fourth noble truth is that we can find this guide through the Eightfold Path. The Eightfold Path is I guess we could say really the basics and the backbone, or the foundation of the Theravada Buddhist teachings. You know. He said the biggest attachment we have is the attachment to the self. And every time that we have an attachment, the self is created. And he pointed that out through the 12 dependent originations, or the wheel of life, or these different links of becoming. And he said that basically, our eyes and senses go out into the world and connect with things. And with that connection, there's a feeling involved, either pleasant or unpleasant or neutral. From there is this, we kind of go out and we start grasping. And if we're not careful, then we get the clinging right away. Once the clinging starts, there's becoming, and then there's being, and then there's or we could call it becoming, and then there's the birth of the self. In other words, we could, from the Western standpoint, we could say that the ego is brought up. It can be noticed because we're craving something, or we're attaching to something to fulfill this body and mind. And then the cycle with the birth of the self, with the attachment, there's aging and death, and there's then the cycle is continued on and on again. And so there's a lot to, you know, this idea, or this teaching of attachments, how to look at it, how to work with it. But the primary point, and we can talk about it a little bit later if we like, but the primary point is to know what they are and that they do lead to suffering. If we attach to something and it's taken away from us, which it will, and we have an attachment to it, it will cause suffering for us. So virtually all the suffering that we have in life is from our attachments at some degree or another. It's very interesting. And so knowing that, the Buddha said we can eliminate our suffering in this lifetime just by being really careful with all of that, not forgetting about the attachment, that type of thing. And so what we did last night, we took a fish bowl, a little bit bigger than this, and I handed out like 4 pieces of paper to everybody, and they wrote their biggest attachment on the piece of paper and they folded it. I told them not to write it in their own handwriting because, you know, like use your left hand or something. But we put it in the bowl and then we discussed the different attachments, and it was interesting. It was, you know, it's a good way for us to really bring these things up. You know, what makes us tick. You know, and again, if we understand attachments, we can understand that there's nothing wrong with finding the finer things in life and having the finer things in life. Just being American, just being in America, we have these opportunities. You know, we have pretty good streets, we have pretty good infrastructure. You know, we probably all have a pretty nice car, and so we're kind of spoiled in a way. And there's really nothing wrong with that. What we have to look at is what happens if it would be taken away from us. How much would we suffer? Would we suffer at all? Would we suffer a little bit? Would we suffer a lot? You know, that kind of thing. And that's a whole discussion in itself, and it goes on and on and on. Because we can talk about different kinds of suffering, whether they're material or whether they're mental, you know, the beliefs, the ideas, all these different things. So like I said, maybe we can talk about that when we're done with the meditation. If we don't get a meditation in, we'll run out of time here. There's a few new people in here. Before we start, are there any questions from anybody? The meditation that we do, I'll guide us through it. So it'll be about a little more than a half hour, maybe 40 minutes. And the first part of it will be guided. So if you're fairly new to meditation, or if there's something that you're not quite sure of, like our style of meditation, I'll express it. I'll explain it, you know, in the guiding, and then we'll go into the silent meditation, which I feel is the most beneficial aspect of the practice. Okay. So just allow the eyes to close. You can place your hands anywhere you like, whatever's comfortable. Try to keep the back fairly straight. Sometimes it helps to remind ourselves to keep the chin lifted. Just bring your attention to the body. Just kind of check it out, see how it feels. And just take a moment and thank yourself for being here this evening. You're doing yourself really a wonderful favor just by taking part in this meditation practice. And each of you are helping out everybody else in the room by sharing your energy. Then I invite you to bring your attention to the breath as your meditation object. If we focus on the breath, we can find that there's many different areas to focus on, but we want to find one, generally one area that kind of fulfills our need for a good solid place to rest our attention. And so that generally means that wherever we feel the breath the most on the body, that could be the tip of the nose or in the sinuses or the throat or windpipe or the rising and falling of the abdomen, anything like that. And if we notice that our mind is wandering quite a bit already at this point, we can do such things as count the breath. This is a kind of a basic practice for us to kind of broaden our meditation object when the mind is busy, when it's darting into the past, going off into the future. Of course, the idea is to be very, very present, to rest in this present moment, which in reality is all we have, but the mind would tend to disagree with that. The mind has a habit of thinking of things that has happened, or planning for something in the future. If there's any kind of anger involved, it has to do with the past. If there's any kind of fear involved, it has to do with the future. And then seemingly sandwiched in between these two areas is the present moment. Just a simple way of looking at it. And then when we focus on the breath or any aspect of the body, for example, or really any object, if the focus is strong enough, we can notice that we are very, very present. And we can notice that because the thoughts and the activity of the roaming mind have settled down. So sitting in stillness, we likely notice that whether the mind is on our meditation object or whether it's drifting off. And if we find that it is drifting off, there's nothing wrong with that, particularly if we notice it. And if we notice the drifting, we just acknowledge that. We might take note of where it drifted off to, and then come back to the meditation object, come back to the breath. And I'm sure for most of us, that will happen again and again and again. But what we're doing is cultivating or training the mind, and after a while that activity of the mind that wants to wander off starts to settle in. it kind of makes, it's kind of like making an agreement, or sometimes it feels like we're breaking a wild horse where it gives up. Then every time we notice that the mind has wandered off, we can actually give ourselves a point. It's almost like a game. We just bring our attention back to the breath. We don't want to be too hard on ourselves. Just realize that this is the practice itself. This is the formal practice of meditation. Focusing on the breath, allowing the activity of the mind to slow down. Sort of feeling as if the thoughts are put into the background. And then ultimately finding peace of mind through the practice. And through the practice, it carries on into our everyday life eventually. Thank you. May each one of us and all beings be well, happy, and peaceful. May no harm come to us, may no difficulties come to us, and may we all meet with spiritual and worldly success. And may we have the patience, the courage, and the understanding to meet and overcome any problems or difficulties that we might face in life. Again, thank you, everyone. We started the evening talking about attachments and how important it is to understand them. I hope everybody understands that. So when we started meditating and the mind goes off, to La La Land or wherever, that is likely, an attachment. It might not be something serious, but it's something, where our intention is to rest the mind on our meditation object. And I think most of us use the breath. There's other objects that can be used, like sounds, things like that. But if we set the intention to do something and then the mind has the attitude of doing something else, it usually goes off into the past or the future, and it lands on some kind of an attachment generally. And the reason it's looked at as an attachment, and again, it might not be something real gripping or real problematic for us, but it's just the idea that the mind is unsettled. And again, that attachment, that Upadana, the Pali term, Sanskrit term, Upadana, is the fuel for our desire, and that desire is the object of our, really the object of our suffering. And that's the very basic, Buddhist doctrine, and something that I think we can all, the better we understand it, the happier and more fulfilled, even more liberated we can be in life.
Yes, I have a question.
Sure.
On attachment. So that I'm going down the lines of self, no self, right? So ego, the construct of, in my mind, of me, I, mine.
How it relates to the attachment?
Well, isn't that in essence the attachment itself right there?
It is, yeah.
Right there.
That's
so
the biggest.
Once I have that self, that I, me, mine, however I describe that ego, whatever, then I desire something, right? I'm attached to it, but there, in order to have an attachment, there has to be that construct of myself.
Yeah, you said it in the word. You said when I want something,
right?
And
right.
that's it right there.
Right there.
But we do have attachment to the body as well, So,
okay.
And we have attachment to the mind. People don't want to lose any of this,
Right.
And that's the cause for, of course, a rebirth. But even more so, that every time that we have an attachment, Buddha said that's actually another rebirth in itself.
Right.
That it's happening again and again and again. So if we would lose the self, the attachment to the self, we would be, we'd be at a different level, so to speak. We'd be awake. We would be like an arhat if we could stay at that.
If we could stay at that,
yeah.
Just keep that continuous.
Yeah.
But when we go into jhana, or when one goes into jhana, if
Mm-hmm.
they can get there.
Anybody can get there.
Well, anybody can get there. Right.
Anybody. It's just staying there.
Staying there. But that's but that's concentrated. And then, so Vipassana. So if you were going to take jhana and Vipassana, right? Is Vipassana more the awareness aspect of it, and jhana more the concentration aspect of it?
Yeah.
Is that like a good broad stroke?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Like the insight or the mind is the Vipassana is a mindfulness-based practice.
Correct.
And there's still cognition happening,
Okay.
So, and it's accepted. I mean, we're that's what we were doing here. I don't think anybody went into jhana. Maybe, but I don't know.
Well, we can get in Vipassana. We can get to what would you consider? I just took the class. What Bhante G would call it access concentration. Would that be that? That's pretty much kind of like when we're there. We got those thoughts way in the back, or we let them go, and we're pretty consistent with the breath.
Yeah,
That would
most like consistent meditators would notice that they're in access, and that would be they would say, I had a really good meditation. You know?
Correct.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it's access is.
Yeah.
It's really named that because we're ready to access jhana, but that we don't necessarily go into jhana.
We don't get to, right.
Because there's still the hindrances, still a little bit of the hindrances. Yeah.
Defilements, all kinds of stuff going on.
And as long as
Bhante Ji says it's the entryway to. In the book, he talks about that access concentration, or he defines it as an entryway to deeper levels. Like
to jhana, yeah.
So that makes little sense when he talks about it in that sense.
Yeah, as soon as the hindrances drop away, well, I wouldn't say as soon, but once they drop away for any length of time, then there's jhana. And the most important thing about jhana is that when you are close to it, or if you feel like you've gone into jhana, you should repeat everything try to repeat everything exactly as you did, including the environment, the posture, even what you ate before. I mean, if you can repeat everything exactly the same, and then you have a better chance of going into that jhana again. And then once you do that, and then you do it consistently, something happens within the brain that says, I can do this. I can go into jhana, and I can sit, I can rest in that. And then you don't have to worry about what you ate before, and all these different things. You can just sit in meditation and go into jhana. But there's a kind of a trick of the mind, because the mind is kind of saying that this isn't possible. But we most likely all of us have gone into jhana just for a moment, but we have no control, absolutely no control over it at this stage. If you can imagine that. But it's like going into that and then recognizing that it's there, and then figuring out all these different tools to keep those hindrances at bay, and then working with the jhana factors, removing that energetic joy. Like, wow, this feels good. I mean, even that will keep us up at a certain level, and then eliminating that energetic joy, and then the blissfulness feels good. We get rid of that. The different levels of thought, and we just kind of work our way in. Any more questions on that? I mean, is that clear it up for you, Joe?
Yeah, it did.
Yeah. Okay, great.
I kind of
great. Yeah, keep. Jhana is a wonderful practice. It's a wonderful, wonderful way to keep the practice consistent. So thank you, everybody. We'll see you in 2 weeks. If you want to watch this again, just go to YouTube, and it's right there. We'll be editing it and then putting it back on. Thanks.
Peter, how you doing, Peter? Yeah.